Is it
in the building.
Seriously?
I didn't know that.
I know. I was like, oh shit, I would have done that instead of just
Yeah, I
on
parked
the street.
across there. I parked
I had to do like a
across
full like K-turn to
Yeah.
get a street spot.
Yeah, I came for a press conference with Congresswoman Williams on Friday.
Okay.
I paid $30 to park just to
Oh,
park.
goodness.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
so,
yeah.
had
You
I
don't want to do
known.
it. Thank you.
If only.
I'll be ready
Well,
next
now,
time.
now we all know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit
Yeah,
here, yeah, I'm sitting
right.
here the whole time, yeah.
Next press conference, here we go.
So what are your hours gonna be? What are your hours gonna be? What?
3:30, 12:30. But we don't go into 5. So we usually have a session, we don't have a session at 4:30 unless it's like a long draw stuff. So, on paper, it's 3:30, 12:30. Your hours is more like 4:20 to 1:50. I'm not sure there'll be those days, we actually.
Right.
Well, I thought those are coming up. Hey, Jonathan, you know, we got Doug Turtle.
I saw that. I actually texted him and congratulated him. I'm sure he's very happy to be getting back into.
So I guess, well, he's been there all week, but I think he rides around in a little weather trail with cameras all day, so he got pretty rough.
I know. I thought that was interesting. I didn't even know that. But
Doesn't he like commentate NASCAR?
he did, yeah. I
I've
think
heard
he
him on
does
that
that too.
before.
Well, here's what it looks like, it's all digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did he leave?
I think it just, there were changes that had been made that I don't think he was thrilled about. I don't know exactly what it was, but you know, and now we don't have the helicopter. So that was a big, I think he probably, that really made him leave.
Everything she saw momentarily.
Okay.
You know, I've heard him for years.
Yeah.
I've heard him for years.
Yeah.
And I would not know him if he walked in the door.
Yeah, yeah, he's good people, so that's a good thing for y'all. That's a good thing for y'all to have, he's good people. And he's passionate about traffic.
He's hilarious.
He is.
He's a funny dude.
If it were up to him, I think WSB would have been an all-traffic station. You know?
See, that was gonna be my son, we worked 5 to 2, and I was gonna drop him, I was like, man, I'm gonna sit in a truck every day with 3 hours driving around. And, but our other 3:30 guy, he's got seniority than me on the weekend, or on the week, during the week. He said, I'll take the bottom one, I kept saying, it's all yours, buddy.
Yeah. So will Doug be in the mornings?
What?
Will Doug be working in the mornings?
Yeah, I think the schedule is 5 to whenever, 5 to 11 or something. But he's on the air 6 to 5.
Okay.
And then, whatever it is after that.
It looked like he's also going to report on transportation things.
So he might do something for the midday or something at the
Yeah.
bell. I don't know if they totally figured that out. The person that hired her just quit, she's leaving Friday.
Oh, wow. Who would that have been? The news director?
I don't even know what it is.
Director of content.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Titles.
It's just always.
And they put this email out saying that she did like this great profound thing by determining we should cover breaking news and weather. That's
Wow, right.
Maybe that's just the 50s.
Right.
What was that, like some profound weather?
be like, I can be certain. Your guess is as live as mine.
Right, right.
close?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh, it's on this. Really helps. I don't know about hers.
Good morning.
Do you think it would help if we scoot them forward?
We're just looking at the lighting.
You
Oh.
got, you got the projector on your head.
They
Okay.
can lean forward, it's not.
Can we push the tables
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah.
Let's try that.
Okay. I won't
They're on
touch-
wheels.
I won't touch anything.
You
See
can
if-
also lean it a little forward.
Yeah, let's see if this helps any.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Is that much better? Or?
Yeah.
A little further up. Is that good?
Much better.
Okay. Thank you for noticing that. Ready? Good morning. I'm attorney Miguel Dominguez with the Dominguez Law Firm. Miguel. Dominguez is Dominguez. This is my client, Tabitha Turner. Tabitha Turner, common spelling. Thank you all for being here this morning. We're going to do a couple of things today to make sure that the public in particular has a good grasp on what occurred to my client, and especially in light of the defendant's actions and how she's taken to social media and the false narrative that has been released. But I thought it'd be helpful for you all to center the room right off the rip, instead of the public and the media having to rely on what an attorney says. I thought it appropriate to start right with the video that my client was able to capture the moment that she suffered this really violent and brutal attack. Can you play the video from Ms. Turner's cell phone, please? We'll just play 30 seconds. Do we have the audio, please? Go ahead and pull it back.
Will this be sent to us as well?
Yes, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, our PR guy sent that out with the actual notice for today. Is there a mute button? Okay. Is there audio to the system in here? No, it's not. Excuse me. Sorry, guys.
It's the system, because the laptop is all the way up. It's just the system.
Well, sorry about that, folks. The audio was important to show, and so I'm sorry that that's not on for you guys right now, but I will send it out to anybody who wants it. What you were going to hear and obviously see is that at some point in, well, let me start from the beginning. Let me first start by saying that Ms. Turner has been in the media herself. She's a well-respected and cared for former basketball player here in Atlanta. She has risen through the ranks in her career as a sports reporter, currently working with the Atlanta Dream, with the Atlanta Hawks, spots on ESPN and all the other things. And she was traveling for work this past Saturday on June 21st when she arrived back home in Hartsfield, at Hartsfield Atlanta Airport, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta Airport. She ordered an Uber, just like any other passenger who arrives and trying to get home. One of the issues in this case that we will have, separate and apart from what the driver did, is that she ordered a comfort Uber, a luxury type Uber. And when you get that on the app, as some of you may be aware, you can even put your preferences as to whether you want a driver talking to you or not, right? But you certainly can put, temperature and things of that nature. And so she ordered a cool Uber. And one thing that she noticed when her Uber pulled up right off the rip was that this was clearly not a comfort vehicle, number one. And secondly, and more importantly, what she realized, and I don't know how many of you were here in Atlanta on this past Saturday, but it was quite the scorcher. And what she realized right off the rip in the vehicle pulling up is that all the windows were down. And so she put her bag in and she got in, and she was, a little thrown off given what she inputted into the app, that this is what she got and that there was no air conditioning on and the windows were down and we've got 90-degree plus weather outside. But she's a kind and patient person, and so she didn't say anything thinking, well, surely when we get out of the airport and we get onto the expressway, these windows will be rolled up and the air will be put on as soon as all of this hot air comes rushing into the vehicle. That didn't happen. And so the first communication she had with the driver was to ask that the air conditioning be put on and that the windows be rolled up. I start with that because, believe it or not, that's the whole thing that jumped this whole incident off. Just the request for the air to be turned on and the windows to be rolled up. The driver did not respond verbally, but she did put the air conditioner on, but she didn't roll the windows up. And so as the ride went on, the vehicle obviously did not cool off. My client was really hot. She was sweating. She addressed the driver again, asking that the windows be rolled up. The response that she got from the driver was not kind and was not friendly. The driver was clearly irritated by, I guess the demands of a passenger at that point. And so what happens next is really alarming. That it's one thing for an Uber driver to be having a bad day and respond verbally in a way that may not be customer friendly, but to pull over on the expressway suddenly in the emergency lane with vehicles flying by, coming out of the airport, and to decide that you're going to tell the passenger, you know what, we're done, you need to get out with your bags on the side of the expressway, is not a reasonable request by any stretch of the imagination. It was unsafe for her to do so, and it was completely unreasonable to do, especially given the fact that there may have been a disagreement about whether the air should be on or not, but there certainly wasn't enough for the trip to be canceled. So my client, as she's interacting with the Uber driver, decides to fast forward this situation and try to come up with a solution. And the solution that she posed is one of two options. Either you get me somewhere safe, which my preference is for you to take me home, or you drop me off at the airport where you pick me up so I can get another Uber, or if you're demanding that I get out of this vehicle, I'll get out of this vehicle once you call the police, and the police is here, and you refund my ride. These were completely reasonable options. My client, as you would have seen and heard the audio had our AV been working, she was completely calm at the time of reiterating on camera the suggestion of how this could be worked out. Unfortunately for my client, especially given what she's experienced to this point, the Uber driver decided that neither one of those options were good for her. Ultimately, what the Uber driver decided to do was to escalate this into a violent interaction. How did she do that? She got out of the vehicle, she came around to my client's door, opened the door after having pulled out my client's bags and set them out. She opened the door and attempted to physically remove my client from the vehicle by grabbing the book bag that she was carrying and getting into a struggle and demanding for her to get out. My client, obviously understanding the risk level and the danger at that point, decided that she was not going to do that and she was going to wait for the police to arrive. At that point, the Uber driver gets back into the driver's seat, and what happens next is now what you just saw, which is now my client is realizing this is getting a little out of control. I'm going to start recording for myself. And so she starts recording, and what you see is that as she starts recording, she is reiterating to the driver, and you will hear this, what the issue is about, right? The windows are rolled down, and it's hot in here. And she even uses a term of endearment that's escaping me right now. She may have said hun or something like that, referring to the driver and saying, look, all I wanted was a cool Uber, okay? And so, you know, we need to get the police or whatever the case may be, but I'm not getting out. And as she's having that interaction with the driver and pans her cell phone towards the window to show that the window is down, it's at this moment that suddenly the Uber driver turns into the back seat and maces my client in the face. That was her response to this. To retrieve a weapon and use it offensively against a passenger who is literally complaining, but in the back seat, not being violent, not being irate. And that's not something that I'm saying. When you review the video and you have the audio, you'll see how calm my client is at that point. All right? She's maced. At the time that she's maced, it is clear on the video she is not being violent. She has not touched the driver in any way. She's not made a threat of violence of any sort. And this is the reaction of the Uber driver. When that happens, the incident doesn't end there for my client. This driver wants to finish the job. And she exits the vehicle again and comes back around, having now blinded my client. And as my client is literally trying to gather herself and remove herself from the vehicle, not being able to see, she is then grabbed and physically assaulted again, to which she has injuries that match those. Her hair was pulled out. As you can see, she has locks. We have that as evidence. All of this has been preserved and also shared with law enforcement. At some point in the altercation, and this is where it gets ripe for this Uber driver to do what she's really done, to really, to add insult to injury, to physical injuries. What happens next is my client is in fear of being pushed out into traffic, into really, really being severely hurt during this interaction. So all she can do is hold on for dear life. She can't see, and the Uber driver has a hold of her hair. She's physically assaulting my client, and in the process of that, the back and forth physically between them, that is the point where the Uber driver has the injury to her eye, which she then goes on social media to exploit. But this is only after my client has not only been physically assaulted, but she's been maced. A passerby, a good Samaritan, notices what's going on, calls the police. The police arrive. The police perform their investigation. Unfortunately, at that point, the officer is in the position of having a he said, she said, because the Uber driver is claiming that my client was the aggressor. And so he can't figure that out. My client, of course, provides the video that she has just taken, but unfortunately, according to the report, the officer could not view the video off of her phone because of the sun glare. I mean, that's what's reported. At some point, the defendant is allowed to leave. My client is free to leave. No arrests are made. But as happenstance would have it, the officer was kind enough to offer to transport my client to the MARTA station. Clearly, he wasn't going to leave her on the side of the road. And when that happens, he asked to see the video again, which he should have done. He could have went in his car in a dark place and viewed the video to begin with. That might have alleviated some of this, but nevertheless, he had the presence of mind to view the video again. And it's at that time that he realizes, okay, this is not such a, I can't figure this thing out. This video tells me everything I need to know. You're 100, my client, Ms. Turner, you're telling the truth. You were the victim here. This Uber driver that I let go is actually the aggressor. So warrants are sworn out. As I understand them, they're active out of Hateville Police Department. Officer Cushing, I believe, was the responding officer. And according to his report, those criminal charges included battery and simple battery. And frankly, I fully expect those to be, just the foundation of the criminal action here against this Uber driver, because clearly a weapon was used. And so I think that there are, as a former prosecutor, I think there are going to be additional charges that are more serious than what is currently on the books. Now, that's what happened. Let me tell you how we get here today, because my client had no intention whatsoever in having this case, particularly a criminal situation where there are warrants out for the defendant. Thankfully, she didn't lose her life or get pushed out into traffic as a result of this, despite her injuries. But the reason we're here today is because of what happened next. And it's really quite egregious, okay? The defendant decides, realizing that she's got a problem here in the fact that she has maced someone for no reason whatsoever that was in her car while being a paying customer, decides that she's going to take to social media. Well, how did she do that? She stalked my client first and foremost. She found out upon stalking her that, oh, this happens to be a celebrity of sorts, or quasi-celebrity, someone who is in the public eye. This is great. Now I can really put the screws to this person by attacking their reputation. And so the reason you're here today, I don't think you would be here otherwise, is that this person posted a TikTok video, 2 that she's posted so far that we're aware of, that has over 1.5 million views, where she is lacing her narrative with falsehoods and misrepresentations, trying to get the public to turn against, this violent and unreasonable passenger that just so happens to be in the public eye. We see this time and again. This is about clout chasing. This is about taking advantage of somebody that she thinks has something to lose. And we're here to fight that and to push back. And we ask the community to push back. And we get it. For those of you out on social media who took the Uber driver at her word, we know that there are Uber drivers every day who are hardworking people who don't take money from anyone and perform that job to the best of their abilities. And we embrace all those people. But for those like this young lady who decide to capitalize and to add insult to injury and harm regular working people like my client, there are ramifications for that. And you best believe that this is just the beginning. We will set this record straight. Why? Because my client, unfortunately, has had many ramifications over the last 48 hours. She's been contacted by league representatives, both NBA and WNBA, about her role and participation in this. Thank God she had the presence of mind to videotape what she did when she started. She's had, even her agent, who had nothing to do with this, has received negative contact from folks on social media. All right? The Hawks, the Dream, all of these executives and all of these organizations have received, even during her game, which broadcast yesterday, she had to deal with all of the commentary that was coming in from the public about how horrible of a person she is and what she did to this poor Uber driver and how the league could be employing someone violent like this that does this to regular working people. It's not the league's fault, right? They're a victim of these lies as well. And there will be hell to pay for what she did. Not to mention the fact that Uber, who charges their customers a heightened rate for certain vehicles, sends her this type of vehicle with this type of driver and puts her in this position to begin with. We'll be dealing with them too. So we wanted to come here today to, my intent, as you can see, was to give you the video up front and for you to see for yourselves and make your own judgments about what's on there and what isn't. I think it's important to also point out to you, in the police report itself, not only is the officer very clear after he's conducted his investigation who the primary aggressor is, which is the Uber driver, Ms. Smith. But in addition to that, he also points out that the spot where Ms. Turner was being demanded to leave the vehicle was extremely dangerous in his opinion. You will find that in the report. His assessment is that it wasn't safe for her to be out there due to the traffic. He also goes as far as to put some of his experience about that particular location in the report. He says, for example, that that area is highly known for sex trafficking victims. He puts that in the report. He puts in the report that he just investigated a homicide not too far from that very location just in February. All of that is in the report. So he's making the assessment right off the rip in his investigation that it was not reasonable at all. Sorry about that.
Sorry. Thank you.
Not being a gentleman. Sorry. It was not reasonable for Ms. Turner to exit where the driver was asking her to exit. In addition to that, and this is the last thing that I'll say before I open it up to questions. For the public and for the media covering this, here's what's interesting. First of all, if you look at the TikToks that this young lady decided to post, there are contradictions and things that don't make sense. You know, I won't address really what she said, but I think it's important to note that for someone who is alleging that my client is the aggressor, that my client supposedly has a weapon, and that's the reason why she maced my client. I think it's important to note that as she's telling the story on TikTok, she leaves the vehicle to try to get my client out. This is allegedly after she's been threatened with a weapon. And then she gets back in the vehicle, right? Actually turns her back on a person who's allegedly in the back seat with a sharp weapon, and then decides to mace my client. Then after that's done and she's already cleared the threat of my client, then she gets back out and continues a physical altercation and a physical assault on my client. How do we know that? Well, she says in her own TikTok, when this happened to me, right, and she's pointing to the camera to show the injury to the eye, we weren't in the vehicle. This happened outside of the vehicle. She says that herself, right? In other words, there's no allegation at the time of this police report on scene and at the time of her TikTok video that my client assaulted her in any way in the vehicle. The public can see that for themselves. Just look at her video, okay? And so that's really important. The last thing I will tell you about that same issue is that, and the public doesn't know this whole idea that she has perpetrated to get the public to side with her against my client, that my client had a sharp weapon, which she's apparently doesn't have the language to say what it was. And I submit to you humbly that that's because there was no weapon and she was just trying to leave it vague purposefully. But this person who says that there was a weapon that was being yielded against her that made her feel threatened, and then maces only in self-defense as a response to that weapon, neglects to tell the police officers whatsoever that that's the reason she maced my client. She never mentions my client having a weapon to the police officer, right? 2 days later, she calls this officer. You don't have to take my word for it. It's in the report. 2 days later, she calls the officer and says, hey, by the way, I'd like to add to my story. I'd like for you to put in your report that I'm telling you that Miss Turner had a weapon. She had a sharp weapon, and that's why I maced her. 2 days later, you're telling me you're sitting as an Uber, an innocent person on the side of the road, you have now used a weapon against a passenger, and you don't tell the police officer that comes on scene that might be arresting you in the next couple of minutes that the reason you maced your passenger was because you were threatened with a sharp object? That escapes you? Of course it doesn't. That's not reasonable. What happened is she had time to think and realize that what she did wasn't reasonable and that she was possibly going to be in trouble. And she tried to backtrack and then create these videos and call the police department and give this false narrative. And we know it's not true. And that's all documented. The police didn't buy it, and that's why she's on her way to jail if she hasn't been picked up already. All right? I'll open it for questions.
Ms. Turner, what backlash have you received and how is it impacting you and your family?
I've received threats via social media about my karma that's coming to me. Defaming my character, calling me all kinds of names, saying just things about why I attacked her, and just how horrible a person I am, and how when they became mother, like attacking me as a mother, trying to paint me as somebody violent. They flooded my social media with threats. They've reached out to people I work with and work for. Last night, leaving the studio, my producer walked me to my car. They offered to follow me on the highway. I have a 1-year-old daughter that I like to take to the games with me. And I can't take her because I don't know who's going to be there to attack me based on what she's saying. I have opportunities with the league that I don't know if are going to happen now because of what she's saying. People questioning my character because of what she's saying. I just wanted to go home. after work and see my daughter. I've gotten threats, and I'm so grateful to the Dream for standing by me and for telling me that if I need extra security, they got me. I didn't ask for this.
What do you want to say to that Uber driver?
Let's not say anything to the Uber driver.
I
Go
have a
ahead.
question for Ms. Turner. When you got into the vehicle and you asked for the air condition to be turned on or the windows to be rolled up, your attorney said that the driver became agitated, but what did she actually say to you? What was the excuse for not rolling up the windows?
May I answer?
Sure, briefly.
That customers who are sick, she likes to leave the windows down in case customers are sick, and that she never rolls them up on her rides.
And when you persisted, did she say anything else? Was it the
Um,
same thing?
It was the same thing, yeah.
And as far as Uber, and this could be for either one of you, what are the next steps that, if any, that you plan to take against Uber?
I haven't communicated with Uber yet, and of course, we will look at, here's the thing. As it stands right now, this is an isolated incident, right? But I imagine when we start looking at this thing and I start looking into Uber and how the whole process works for them to assign a driver, what we may find is that there is a pattern here of charging customers a elevated amount for a particular type of ride and actually not being able to fulfill for whatever reason, or just not fulfilling that ride that's being purchased, right? And so that's a problem. That's a problem for all customers of Uber, including myself. The expectation is if I'm paying for a particular type of vehicle, a particular type of comfort level, a particular type of driver. I mean, we've all had different levels of Uber drivers. The expectation is that if Uber says on the app, that's gonna be fulfilled, and they're asking you questions like, well, what temperature do you want? Or do you wanna interact? Do you want music? Whatever it is, then the expectation should be by the customer that that's exactly what's going to come, especially if you're paying for it, right? And so we'll have to look at that. I'm not gonna go into details about what happens next, but, in the long run, but certainly there is a harm in the type of vehicle that was sent by Uber. There is a harm for sure in the physical assault and the anguish and mental, stress that she's going through right now. But it's all coming back to Uber through their driver in terms of what training was provided for this woman. She's on TikTok, writing checks and literally from a perspective of a business, right? She has committed the acts that she's committed, but then she's also trying to actively destroy a customer that rode with her via researching who she is and then communicating with employers and other folks. I mean, all of this is documentable, right? And so what policies does Uber have in place for their drivers where if you're having a bad day or you don't like a customer, that you don't decide now to get on your platform, which, look, there's no question that this was clout chasing. I think we looked at her website. She may have had a post or two that maybe had 1,000 or so views. She's got 1.5 million as of today, as of this morning, the last time we checked. I mean, this is a big deal for her. And so we want to hold her and Uber responsible for that. Yes, sir.
When people watch this video, when some people do, they're willing to say, listen, you were asked to get out of the car multiple times. You also called her an R slur. You're not so much a victim, but an instigator.
Sure.
How do you respond to that?
Well, so thank you for bringing up the R word that was used. I want to make sure that you have seen on the video that it was the driver that introduced that word specifically into the conversation, and my client was only repeating it back. Not that that makes it right, but clearly we all understand that when we believe we're being wronged and a derogatory word like that is being used towards us, and we're upset, and we know we're in the right, things come out of our mouth. At the end of the day, it is very clear, there is no one who's gonna watch this video and come away from it believing that my client instigated this thing in any way. In fact, the police said in his report, the police officer stated in the report that as he watched the video, one of the things that he notes is how calm my client is when this is right before she's maced, right? I mean, there's just no way that she instigates this when you have a driver who initiates physical contact and assault on my client twice, once trying to remove her from the vehicle and once after having maced her, and then once in the vehicle by using this weapon against her. There's no one that can see this video and not know 100% my client was the victim. Now, in terms of the other part of your question as to her being asked to get out of the vehicle, that's easier said than done. You're on the expressway. There's cars flying by, and there's a determination that needs to be made. Is it safer for me to sit in this car, not having been assaulted yet, she didn't know what was about to happen, and wait for the police to come and sort this thing out, and then I can get transported out of here safely? Or should I get out of this car and let this person who hasn't assaulted me yet leave, right, and potentially take off with my bags, whatever the case may be? And so I think that the police officer made clear that the area where she was being told to exit the vehicle was extremely dangerous to her person.
I think also an argument that will also be made from the other woman in this is that in the video, that was not the 10-second or 30-second video that you showed, but
Sure.
in the full-length one.
Sure.
It shows that you hear your client saying, I feel threatened, I feel threatened. The question has to be posed, if you felt threatened, why not remove yourself from that vehicle, whether you're on a highway or you're in a neighborhood?
Sure. To feel threatened and to be physically assaulted are two different things, right? She's telling this lady, look, I don't want to engage with you physically in any way, but you're making me feel threatened. And what I'd like to happen next, if you're telling me that this ride is over and I've got to remove myself from this vehicle onto a dangerous expressway, I need you to get the police here. Let's let the police, look, even the officer says in his report, had the defendant, Ms. Smith, called the police and allowed the police to come and just either sat there quietly or, you know, they both just stepped aside and just waited for the police to come, this would have never happened. It escalated because my client was assaulted in 3 different ways at 3 different moments, none of which was instigated or started or initiated by my client. And that's really important.
This question's for Ms. Turner. A couple of questions. With this warrant now against the driver, do you in any way feel vindicated? And secondly, are you concerned about your career? Because when you talk about the backlash from possibly fans or people who just seeing this online, are you concerned that you will still have a job, still have your reputation in the long run?
Answer the career question. I'll get to the vindicated question.
Yes, I am concerned. There has been a calling for my job from some of the comments on social media about wanting to get me fired. And that's very hurtful. I love what I do, and I've worked very hard to get where I am. Very hard. My character has been called into question, and I'm grateful to the people who I do work with because they called to make sure that I was okay first. But yes, I am concerned about it, yes.
This has been huge. I mean, you got to understand. On her answer, I just want to piggyback on this. You know, you've got family and friends and colleagues, neighbors, you know, mother, I think even your siblings. These folks are watching what's happening to their hero in the family, what's happening on social media. You know, and look, I'm not blaming the public. They were hoodwinked. They were purposefully tricked and lied to by this individual for Facebook likes or whatever it was, TikTok or Instagram. That is something that we're seeing in our society these days that is really, really troubling. And any of us can fall victim to that. I mean, somebody can literally watch this video learning about me for the first time and decide to put something crazy that goes viral on social media, and I'll be left to pick up the pieces and figure out how to make sure that my reputation is intact. All of us are susceptible to that, especially when you're in the public eye. Let me address your first question about vindication. Look, it's a sort of a bittersweet moment that there were criminal warrants issued for this young lady's arrest. And the reason I say that is, at the end of the day, the public backlash did not change and has not changed. Hopefully after this and the public understands more about what really happened here, the sentiment will change, right? But it doesn't change what the damage that has already been done to my client. I mean, that can't be viewed as vindication when you know the truth. I'm sitting here with her. I know the truth. I've seen the video. I've seen how the assault happened. The police have made a decision about what the evidence is. I mean, her locks were pulled out. Like, we're preserving hair at this point, right? So we know what happened, and so yes, is there a certain level of legal vindication, at least on the criminal aspect thus far? Of course there is. Is the police report very informative and helpful as to what happened here? Sure it is. But it doesn't make a bit of difference when you have someone acting as irresponsibly and reckless with the truth as Ms. Smith has in this case, and the damage to her reputation. There's no vindication there. There's no vindication. I mean, I've had to sit through meetings from representatives from the league with my client. This has had to be explained, and again, thankfully, everyone who has seen the moment in the video right before she's maced has been able to plainly see, okay, clearly Ms. Turner was a victim here, right? But who knows what would have happened had she pulled her cell phone out 30 seconds too late and she didn't know she was about, and has no concern for the truth to try to demolish that in an afternoon. And has no concern for the truth to try to demolish that in an afternoon.
In regards to Smith's social media
Go ahead.
accounts,
Let me take him, he hasn't.
Do you think a final civil action related to this?
I think it's very likely.
in regards to Smith's social media accounts, have you contacted TikTok, made any effort to suspend her account, try to have these videos removed? Do they bear any responsibility in your mind?
You know, it's hard to know that without knowing the technology that goes into pushing these things out and whether they are aware of the criminal action, if they're aware of the untruths. I don't know that yet. It's a great question, and I'll receive it. But there's not much for me to comment on there yet in terms of the responsibility that TikTok may have. You know, they're a foreign entity, and you have one of their users who may not be violating their internal policies in terms of content, may or may not. For example, everyone knows if you put sexual content up, right, that often comes down. I don't know that a user giving her alleged version of what happened to her runs afoul of that or not. but we'll see where this goes.
As far as Uber goes, have you filed a complaint, or I'm not sure what their report or complaint process looks like? Did you ever get your refund for the ride that wasn't completed?
Did you get the refund?
I believe so, yes.
Uber's aware of what transpired here. Now that I'm involved in it, they're gonna know a lot more about what transpired here. And we'll make sure that they have full access to all the things that you guys have and that we have. Yes, ma'am.
I have not seen the video, but what was the injury the driver is claiming that she received?
The injury to the driver is that in the struggle on the outside of the car, once my client is maced, they're entangled with each other, and she gets, scratched on the eye, on the outer lid from what I've seen. And, she put up a picture where she was essentially bleeding from a little gash that she had. And we don't, to make it clear to the public, we are not saying that didn't happen. What we are saying is that it happened as a direct result of the physical assault that the driver initiated and continued on my client as my client was trying to get away from the situation. So it absolutely happened. She just neglected to tell the public how it happened, and that's huge in the story.
Ms. Turner, since you were talking about, just your concern for your job, concern for your reputation, is there anything you want to say to people who are fans of yours, who respect you, who watch you and watch your reports? Is there anything you would like to say to them?
Everybody who knows me knows that I am raw. I am who I appear to be. I love life. I love people. You can ask anybody who knows me. I open my doors to people. I have opened my doors. People drop off strays at my house because I'm always rescuing animals. I'm a good person, a very good person, who's worked from my days at Tech playing ball to my sorority to switching careers. I've been fighting and championing for people and for women and for people who are less advantaged. I've championed for people. This is so hurtful that this is happening. And especially now, to have my character called into question. I was coming back from a major opportunity with a major network that could escalate my career when this is happening. I have an opportunity next week that I don't know if it's gonna be there or not because of this. It's so hurtful this morning. Having to be there for my daughter, just trying to be present. She feels all of it. I can't even pick her up because this left arm is just so sore. I love my job. I love what I do. I love the people and the athletes who I represent. And they all know me. They all know me, and I just thank them for their support. They've reached out. This is hurtful. And it's also very frightening because I don't know what somebody might do based on what she said. My mom this morning told me that my siblings had seen all the stuff written about me and they didn't want to bring it to her because of how it might make her feel. And I had to just get dressed and I wanted to throw up coming in here. my daughter was on my leg, asking for my attention, and I can't be there for her because I'm just torn.
And I want to make clear, you know, everything that Ms. Turner is expressing right now, it's possible for someone to receive that in a vacuum and be like, okay, you know, you were physically assaulted, you know, where's all this emotion coming from? You know, it's the assault and obviously the terror of a very traumatic event, that by itself, but to then be re-victimized by the perpetrator and to have a situation where you've got 1 million+ people that potentially have the ability to come away with their own opinions and you know, like when I started this conversation today, you know, Ms. Turner had no, you know, she could have used her celebrity to sort of do the same thing and tell a story in advance. You know, she had no desire to do that. Obviously, this was a really traumatic situation, and you know, she was going to be cooperative with the police to figure out what needed to happen. And initially, you know, as I stand here right now, I'm thinking about my initial conversations with Ms. Turner, and it's unbelievable to me thinking back that she was actually concerned that when this was just a criminal matter, that the driver receive whatever help that she needed to receive to deal with why she reacted in such a violent way and what was going on with her that she would do this to Ms. Turner, right? We were completely blindsided. And I'm telling you, this was the conversation we were having, where there was actually concern for how this young lady might be dealt with from a criminal aspect. And what did she do? Not knowing the type of person that she victimized? Re-victimize her. When Ms. Turner was actually concerned about what may or may not happen with her. And the thanks that she gets for being kind-hearted is to have someone trying to get clout and trying to create a narrative, a false narrative on social media that absolutely causes this whirlwind of direct impact on her career, on her employers. I mean, you look at those TikToks. This young lady went through the trouble of going on the online and getting actual photographs. And as she's narrating this thing, it's almost like professionally done. The images that are being used of my client and other things as she's making her points. I mean, there is a legitimate intent to harm Ms. Turner. And she was successful, unfortunately. And there's going to be some accounting to be had as a result of that. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll end with this. You know, we want justice for Ms. Turner. We're not here to point the finger at a public full of people who are warm-hearted and who found themselves on the side of viewing this video by Ms. Smith online and deciding, you know, that they wanted to stand behind her and see justice for, you know, this terrible person that had harmed this innocent, you know, Uber driver, because that's the message that they got. You now know more about what really happened here. And this was all orchestrated, and you should now know who the real victim here is, and we're hoping to put a stop to that. Thank you. Thank you, folks.